We want to take a closer look at the timeline here and what we're learning about law enforcement's response as this all played out. So for that, now we want to bring in former San Bernardino, California police chief and an ABC News contributor, Jarrod Burguan. Jarrod, thanks so much for being here. So let's just start right from the top here in the order of events. So this shooter crashes his truck, he fires on two people, he's outside here, and ends up actually firing at the school for 5 minutes before he even entered. I mean, what's happening at 911 dispatch at this point?
We don't know exactly because they haven't shared the details as to the dynamics going on in their dispatch center. But my guess is this is a relatively small community, so their dispatch center was probably completely overwhelmed. And I would imagine there's a part of this narrative that says a lot of the resources were pulled away from where the school is, going to the original shooting where the grandmother's house is.
We have heard that police said that they might have actually passed the shooter on his way to the school. We know that the shooter entered the school through a back door that had been propped open by a teacher. I would imagine there's probably maybe different rules or procedures based on the school district. Is there standard guidance about leaving an open, unmonitored door at a school?
There is. Most schools have a pretty robust security program in place. They have what's called a single point of entry, which means that if you want to access that school during the hours that students are there, that you got to go in through one point of entry that can be monitored and somebody can be there to potentially intercept you.
So we know the first local officers entered the school only 2 minutes after, and there were 17 officers on site within 15 minutes. So there was a quick response. What is the protocol then for an active shooter situation?
The active shooter protocol says that you take the resources that you have and you assemble those resources and you go after the threat. It doesn't matter whether you have 1 officer, 5 officers, 12 officers, you pursue the threat in a tactical, strategic way that to some degree is as safe as possible.
That, of course, underlines the thing that we've now learned that has so many people understandably across the country upset, and that is that the police commander on the scene said he chose to wait to confront the shooter because he thought this was no longer an active attack. Of course, we learned that as they were waiting, there were children trapped inside this classroom calling 911 with pleas for help. I mean, Jarrod, I know this is a chaotic situation. How does something like this happen?
So I have to go back a little bit in the history of how we started dealing with active shooters. And there was that training that came out after Columbine that said, we got to put previous tactics of wait for a SWAT team, wait for greater firepower. We got to put that aside. We have to do things differently.
We've also learned that recently that the school police chief is the one who was in command throughout this incident and not the city police chief taking over. I mean, is that how that typically would play out?
I don't think it would typically play out that way in most communities. I don't know the dynamic in Uvalde. We did see that the school district police department is a very small force. Under those circumstances, the city police department that would presumably have greater resources, or a county sheriff's department that would presumably have greater resources and a greater level of tactical awareness because of the type of training that they do, that they would not have taken over that scene and inserted themselves.
Jarrod, this is a very broad question, but I mean, so many people reacting to what we're learning about this response feel that they've never heard of something considered that they could consider reckless, irresponsible, or that openly cost the lives of children. You're somebody that knows this just about as well as anyone could, having been in the middle of situations like this, having been at the top of a police organization. I'm just curious, what is your response to the way these officers and the way the people in charge decided to act on that day?
So from having lived through this and spending an entire career in this business, I understand how officers can maybe take that moment and slow down and assess what they're dealing with and question whether they're dealing with an active shooter still or if this has transitioned into a barricade. I understand that. I don't understand the timeline that elapsed and the fact that they stayed with that. They knew that children had been wounded. They knew that they had 911 calls, which presumably went into a dispatch center and should have been communicated to those officers that were in the hallway. And they know that he wasn't in there alone.
And there's certainly a lot more that we'll learn about this response, but the facts as we know them now, this was a catastrophic failure there in Texas. Thank you, Jarrod Burguan. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.